Good day, everybody. Coach John Maria here, life coach, study coach, special education teacher, or whatever you want to call me. I'm here to help out middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students overcome their neurodevelopmental difficulties. A little trivia about myself. Did you guys know that when I started out as a special education teacher, I had second thoughts about the career because this wasn't really my my dream job or anything like that. My dream job growing up was to someday become a corporate trainer, speaker, and facilitator. And you know what? 5 years into my job as a life coach, study coach, and special education teacher, I got the opportunity to train for university. But after only one time of actually doing this, and I had loads of fun, by the way, and I'd like to credit all of those individuals as well who hired me for that one time. I realized something. I realized that this opportunity that God has given me to work with people with special needs, I love the job more than my childhood dream job. And when I examined it, one of the reasons why I love this job so much is because I get to interact with what, in my opinion, is some of the most interesting, amazing, unique people in the world. Okay? So, of course, I'm talking about people with autism, and that's our topic for today. We're talking a very specific portion of the autism spectrum disorder, high functioning autism. To know why they're amazing, unique, and all of these things, okay, find out more as we get into our slides. Before we move on forward, let's just take a look at a few things. First of all, why am I talking about just high functioning autism? Okay, well, I want to be fair with you guys. Okay, autism is a wide spectrum. As in accordance to what that is, we'll elaborate as we go on further in this video. And this has been my area of expertise for 10 years, so I don't really want that I talk about the entire thing and I talk about my experience, but really I've only experienced sort of like one end of the spectrum. It wasn't really exactly my choice to just handle them, but that was what people thought I would be good at, and I guess they weren't wrong. I mean, I've been doing this for pretty much 10 years, but I can't really say that I'm an expert on the entire spectrum, but I only know much about and experience one end of the spectrum, which is on high functioning autism. Okay, and because of that, just as usual, a disclaimer in all of our videos is to, of course, tailor fit everything I'm about to say to your own context. Okay, so first and foremost, let's define it. What is high functioning autism? Okay, high functioning autism is not a normal term, which means that when you go to formal books that diagnose this condition, it's not really something that you would find high functioning autism in those words. Instead, we have two different diagnostic terms that have appeared in history, and we'll discuss a little bit about this. Most recently, if you look at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, 5th edition, you would see this as Autism Spectrum Disorder Level 1, which means Level 1 means that it's the mildest, or the ones that require the least amount of intervention. More on this later. And as well as it's been used interchangeably with Asperger's syndrome. And we'll talk about the history behind that. Okay, there have been some people that differentiated between high functioning autism and Asperger's, but I'm one of those on the idea that I don't really want to distinguish them, because as individuals they're all very different anyway. Some of the symptoms are different, and that's basically one of the things that we'll talk about briefly in the history today. So the first person that I could talk about today is Dr. Hans Asperger. So this is the guy who's named after the condition. So in 1944, basically according to Tony Attwood wrote that Hans Asperger advocated that education will render harmless the dangers which are in the child's genetic disposition. So during this time, what Dr. Asperger was doing was that he was spotting a few of these kids who behaved not in the usual way, but he was arguing that they were not necessarily impairments that would, impair them from contributing to what was then Nazi Germany during his time. And when you look at the profile, although this fact is disputed, when you look at history, it can be said that Asperger saved the lives of a lot of people with autism because he was arguing that they were not inferior, but in fact they are just different. That is a sentiment that we still see today, and that is actually one of the main points that I'd like to drive home for you guys today. So I would say that aside from his contributions to the knowledge of what autism is, Dr. Hans Asperger is a hero, like an Oscar Schindler type of guy, but for people with autism. No? So basically, we understand that these people are functional, but they are different. So he was the first person to say that and actually document it formally, right? So today we see this particular this and just a few years ago. I remember I was already coaching when they transitioned from the fourth edition of DSM into the fifth edition of DSM, and basically there was a huge change here because in the fourth edition of DSM, um, autism was divided into what you would call three categories. So you have autistic disorder, which was the classic autism, as they would say. You have Asperger's disorder, which is Asperger's syndrome, and you have PDD-NOS, which means pervasive developmental disorder. PDD means autism, and then NOS, not otherwise specified, which means that this guy is autism, has the symptoms of autism, but we don't know exactly where to place him, right? So that was, and you can understand with terminologies like this that are not clear, it was difficult for them to use that manual to diagnose individuals. So they actually transitioned from just looking at autism in terms of categories to looking at autism in terms of the level of intervention that they're going to require. So now you have level 1, which is mild, level 2, moderate, level 3 is severe. Of course, there's more to it than this, but again, we're trying to simplify things. So in summary, we just transitioned from, looking at autism, different types of autism as different categories, and then transitioning into just what we would call the differences in level of intervention needed. It is very important to note here that one of the things that made a person high functioning in autism was having an IQ, okay, which is normal or higher than 70. So that means that that was the main difference between Asperger's and autistic disorder. But then again, I would say that this move in itself is not bad because just because a person has high IQ doesn't mean that they will require low levels of intervention. I guess that was sort of the assumption before, that if the person was intelligent enough, that this person was not going to require a lot of intervention, but that's not true. I once handled somebody whom you'll see a little uh, uh, towards the end of this presentation, who actually has an IQ of around the 140s and the 150s, which is pretty high. That's very near Albert Einstein already when you think about it. But still, he required a lot of intervention. He went to the best university, but he needed help, controlling his behavior. He was pulling the hair of his classmates and things like that. And there was a lot of behavior modification needed, even though he was already a college student. So that sort of thing, I feel like when you look at DSM-5 now, it took away from the idea that intelligence was the end-all be-all, which is something, or IQ rather, is end-all be-all in the diagnosis and the classification of impairment, which I kind of like. Okay, so one of the most notable guides when it comes to looking at individuals with high-functioning autism looks at it from the old diagnostic criteria, or the old label, you could call it that, Asperger syndrome. And this is the book, The Complete Guide to Asperger Syndrome by Tony Attwood. If you're a teen or a young adult, or if you're a parent of somebody who has high functioning autism, I would still recommend you to buy this book. Now, herein lies where I think the controversy when it comes to high functioning autism kind of is kind of highlighted. So now that they transitioned from DSM-4 to DSM-5, is it still right to call people with high functioning autism Asperger's syndrome or Asperger's disorder? My opinion on that is very simple. If you grew up knowing that you're used to the idea of calling yourself with Asperger's, go ahead. Whatever is comfortable with you. If you prefer to use the idea of autism, to use the label autism, or if you're not totally open about it, okay, of having a condition, that all of these things are perfectly fine. So I will tackle this in a different video associated with identity, but the baseline is that I don't believe that any one of these things determine your identity. Okay, so whether or not you're super comfortable, you're uncomfortable with it, whether you want to use one label or the other, okay, whether you're a parent or a young adult, it's okay, right? Take your time with it. It's something that you have to reflect on. It's something that could have a lot of implications in day-to-day life, with advantages and disadvantages associated with it anyway. So, be patient with yourself, be kind with yourself when it comes to this specific issue, all right? Okay. So moving forward, so what is autism? Okay, so I talked a lot about autism prior to this without talking about the kind of things that uh, get them impaired and things like that. And the reason why I did that is because I didn't want to just incite the usual stereotypes when it comes to autism. Like in my country, people say that they're individuals who are in their own world or and things like that. I want to be as specific as possible while still being simple. Okay, that's why I'm not going to be using the terminologies when I classify them. So when I classify the impairments that you see here now on screen, okay, but generally, okay, there are four areas of impairment that we observe in individuals with autism. So remember this when you're dealing with somebody who's like this. And for you, if you're an individual with autism, maybe this might be the first time uh, for you hearing this summarized. So this is generally the trouble that with your condition. Okay, so the first one is the social inability to put oneself in other people's shoes. Okay, the second one is the exaggerated need for predictability and order. Five, extremely sensitive five senses rather. Okay, and lastly, not able or cannot manage a typical life load. Okay, let's examine each one up close. All right. First one is the social inability to put oneself in another's shoes. Okay, this is called the theory of mind deficit, and one of the pioneers or the people who really developed this is the renowned clinician who focused on just autism. His name is Dr. Simon Baron Cohen. Okay, theory of mind deficit means that you're unable to cognitively imagine or put into your head what another person might be experiencing. Okay, and of course, in day-to-day life, this can lead to certain impairments. Okay, according to Simon Baron Cohen, okay, he says that people with autism have intact affective empathy but impaired cognitive empathy. What does this mean? All right. So I'd like to tell you guys a little bit story about my younger brother, 9 years younger than me, about and when it comes to him having Asperger's. So there are times that there are a lot of awkward things that I prefer him not to say. For example, in front of other people when there are embarrassing facts and he tends to say it. So I have to go up to him, bro, we can't say that. Okay. He goes, oh yeah. But when he, for example, sees a sick animal or a dead animal and things like that, he's affected profoundly, you know. And personally, I don't really see that as necessarily a bad thing. I think that that makes a person very honest. I think that in that sense, because of this fact, you can trust people with autism more than individuals who have perhaps, for example, the opposite, high cognitive empathy but low affective empathy. In Simon Baron Cohen's words, a person like that is a psychopath. You have the ability to understand another person, but you really don't care, right? So that and Simon Baron Cohen, in one of his TED talks, which I'll link down below, talks about people like Ted Bundy and such who have these profiles. Like they have such. Of course, Ted Bundy is a well-known mass murderer, right? A serial killer, and so in that sense, people with autism are the opposite of people with psychopaths. So that makes me love, and that's one of the reasons why dealing with them on a daily basis. A lot of people say I must have a lot of patience. Nah, they are genuinely interesting. They're genuinely amazing individuals who think in ways that improve me also as a person. So I would say that I learned so much more and got so much out of this profession more than I was able to help, simply because I'm always dealing with people with autism. Okay, right? My personal opinion is this: it's not also that they cannot understand; they don't have the capacity to understand. Of course, part of my job is to equip individuals with autism with the ability to understand others. They eventually do, especially when I give them structured material, such as, for example, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective Teens by Sean Covey, right? So when you have a structured way of understanding other people, I find that they're able to do so. But they're never quite able to do so at the same speed. So it's about the personal speed of processing social information. So, for example, if a person were to ask me right now, "Hey, would you like some cake?" And of course, I'm feeling a little bit I want to be a bit more polite, because in the Asian culture, you kind of want to say no at first. You kind of wait, no, it's okay. And then you wait for them to kind of force it. No, here's some cake, here's some cake. Oh, okay, fine, right? People with autism are just going to go, yeah, sure, give me that cake, right? Okay, so they don't get it immediately, the entire dynamic of the entire social situation. So it's just a matter of the speed. But eventually, when you process with them the idea, it's not like they don't understand it. So if you give them that space, for example, to think, look at themselves from a third person perspective, for example, we call that metacognition in executive skills intervention. They're able to adjust and improve their behavior over time. Okay, so actually, one of the more interesting media that I found on Netflix is the show by stand-up comedian Hannah Gadsby. She's actually diagnosed with high functioning autism. He says that having high functioning autism feels like in a room that you're the only sober person in a room full of drunks, and vice versa. So it really is just a different way of keying into social information. And in my opinion, my experience, it's also a matter of the speed. Okay. Now, even in fictional literature, you find people who have high functioning autism, and my favorite one is actually Newt Scamander, who really illustrates the idea that they have so much intact affective empathy, but not really intact cognitive empathy. So Newt Scamander is seen as awkward. He may make people feel uncomfortable. Other people feel uncomfortable. He lacks eye contact and things like that. But at the end of the day, he's such a caring guy. He cares for animals and things like that. He has such amazing empathy with creatures. That's why if you guys want to learn about people in fictional, he's actually my favorite fictional character with autism. And he's found in the Fantastic Beasts movie series by J.K. Rowling, also set in the past of the Harry Potter universe. So there. The second thing I'd like to talk about today, the second area of impairment, is people with autism usually have this exaggerated need for predictability and order. Okay, so Frith, okay, another well-known researcher on this topic, calls this the idea of weak central coherence. So notice, I'm just putting down the technical terms if you guys want to research, but it's basically the exaggerated need for predictability and order. So early diagnostic tests suggest that they prefer the presence of objects and patterns rather than faces. So you, for example, show kids with autism a face. They did this experiment, right? A lot of them would prefer to zoom. They show him a face and also not. And then another thing is an interesting or a colorful object. They will usually key into the object rather than the face. As compared to neurotypical individuals, those without autism or any other condition, they would usually look at that face. Okay, all right. This also leads to the idea that people with autism are easily upset by physical changes or schedule changes. Like they want the furniture rearranged in a arranged in a specific way at home. They want their schedule to be to be a certain way, waking up and sleeping. Okay, all right. And so one of the areas where I think that people with autism really need to watch out for are life transitions. So you can see there's a picture here. This is my coachee, Patrick. So I got permission from from him and his mom to talk about him here. So this is a picture of us during his college graduation in 2013, and this was a happy day. Just like everybody else, graduation is a happy day. But adjusting to new life, in the workplace was difficult for him. And also, I've experienced this with a lot of my coachees who are also younger. They graduate from high school to college, and then they get into a new environment. It usually causes a lot of distress for them. They transfer houses, causes a lot of distress, right? So they change a set of friends and things like that. It causes a lot of stress. So please watch out for this. If you need some help, for example, transitioning and really need processing it, so maybe you could get some professional help as well, a clinical psychologist, or a life coach as myself to help, guide you through it, that would be useful, all right? So the next area of impairment that I'd like to describe are the extremely sensitive five senses. Okay, so touch, hearing, sight, taste, these things, and people with autism can really get overwhelmed, and this is called sensory integration difficulties. It's a whole approach that they use for kids. My wife is a licensed occupational therapist, and she's a pediatric occupational therapist. And some of the issues that we see here would be that a lot of people with autism, they tend to have sharp senses. but they get easily irritated and overstimulated. Like for example, you put them in a mall. There are a lot of lights, there are a lot of sound. It probably couldn't stay there for too long. They would want to go home and just retreat inside their room and things like that. So and they can be, you know, they could have issues with feeding, like they can't eat things of a certain texture, of a certain color, of a certain taste, right? They could be sensitive to touch. If you watch the movie Temple Grandin, for example, which is about the real life animal husbandry doctor, Temple Grandin, and you'd see that she even invented a hug machine to help her calm down because light touches make her feel not so good. So she likes hard touches, which is also my experience dealing with people with autism. When you hug them, you want to hug them tight. Now, not light touches because that really stimulates them. So, you know, and one of the areas that I see frequently among my students where this is a problem is with it when it comes to their nutrition. So, if you coaches are watching this, please do not be rigid when it comes to the food that you eat. Sometimes, just to make it easy, parents just kind of like give in to their request of eating fast food every day, all day, and things like that. Please don't do that. So, we people with autism, just like people with ADHD or any other neurodevelopmental condition, there's also this tendency to correlate it with problem with with a problem with your health, allergies and autoimmune conditions and things like that. So please keep yourself healthy. If there's one area of your life that I would recommend that you improve, it would be your nutrition. Okay, eat healthy food. Of course, that's the easier said than done for a lot of individuals. But I'm praying for you. I'm hoping for you. I hope that you can overcome it. Okay. The last area of that a lot of people with high functioning autism will tend to struggle is managing a typical life load. So what is that? Just uh, going to work. Which is typical for most people. And this is called an executive skills deficit, which is the central this problem for people with ADHD, such as myself. So this is where we really meet and we really relate, which is why people with ADHD and autism oftentimes they become very good friends. And that's from my experience managing like social skills groups and things like that. They form bonds that are for life, right? So if you want to learn more about executive skills, look for Peg Dawson and Dick Ware online. Okay, we'll link that down below as well. All right, so this means that they have a hard time managing life, right? Particularly when life becomes more independent. So once again, we get back to transitions, and when of course, from high school to college, you manage your own schedule, you manage your own time. Okay, that becomes a problem. So many individuals who did well in high school, for example, or in grade school, where everything was structured, just went to school and everybody did it for you. And the whole life structured your life for you. You just had to do the studying and things like that. They tend to excel there. But when you put them in an independent setting, such as the workplace or or in college, that's when things become out of control sometimes, right? And this can lead to burnout, issues in inadequacy, and even some mental health concerns. So, yeah. So these are the things that people with autism have to watch out for. But here's something I'd like to point out as we end this presentation today. Okay, every impairment associated with high functioning autism, interestingly enough, corresponds to a desirable trait. Okay, so for example, the social inability to put oneself in another's shoes. When you think about it, low cognitive empathy but high affective empathy, that leads to a person who has a lot of compassion. A person who has an exaggerated need for predictability and order. Okay, that's structure, and structure is a good thing, not just for on a personal basis, but for society. Extremely sensitive. Five senses. That's because they tend to be very detail oriented. Okay, like it's hard for them to cope with the idea that so they can really be detail oriented as well. People with high functioning autism, and the ability, when you can't manage a typical life load, that means you could be a specialist. Which is why many people with executive functioning difficulties, they don't really question what they want to do with their life. I certainly didn't have a lot of questions there. I knew that I wanted to do something with people and helping individuals, because I know that it's hard for me as a person with ADHD, for instance, to cope in a typical 8 to 5 job and things like that. So when you think about it, a person with autism can be seen as a person who has a lot of who has a lot of compassion, who wants a lot of structure, who's very detail oriented, and is a specialist in whatever he or she is going to do. When you look at it that way, okay, you see, impairment is still context dependent. The only reason why they're impaired in this sense is because the rest of the world operates in a manner that's different from how they operate. So, and that's why Tony Atwood, the guy who I mentioned earlier on, the author of The Complete Guide to Asperger's Syndrome, he basically says it's a difference. It's just a difference between in perceiving, thinking, learning, and relating. And that's why when I look at different cases of people who have high functioning autism that we frequently mention all throughout history, such as Albert Einstein, Vincent van Gogh, Andy Warhol, and individuals like that, I really think that people with autism are going to be an amazing resource someday. If only we really accepted them for who they are. If we structured life that would maximize their potentials and really, um, help them contribute to society. And I think that I'm on that train, and I'm on that boat. That I really want to see a world in the future where the skills of these wonderful, amazing individual, unique individuals, right, could really be maximized. Okay, not to say, by the way, if you're a person with autism and you're working at the grocery store and you're arranging things better than everybody else, that you're useless. You don't have to be Albert Einstein. But I think that even if your love in life is simply just to arrange things in a certain way better than everybody else, then you're contributing to society in such a great way. And I really believe that God has an amazing purpose for individuals with neurodevelopmental conditions in general. But when I really look at people with autism, I'm really excited. Like one of the things that I always look forward to is when I get old and see what they do. I'm always excited to see what they do because having been with a lot of these individuals for many years, I know what they're capable of, and I hope the world will also see that potential in them. So with that, we end our presentation for today. We hope that this was useful for you. If this was useful for you, please like, share, comment, and then subscribe to the channel as well. We have a Facebook page, a website, and also a conversations page if you'd like to contribute to positive conversations about people overcoming neurodevelopmental difficulties. With that, my name is John Maria, signing off. Goodbye, and God bless you.